I'm Julia Child. Welcome to my house. What fun we're going to have baking all kinds of incredible cakes, pies, and breads right here in my own kitchen. Nancy Silverton, owner of La Brea Bakery in Los Angeles, transforms this buttery brioche dough into the stickiest of pecan sticky buns and her justly famous brioche pockets. Join us on Baking with Julia. This is a brioche, and it's made out of the most beautiful, buttery, rich, light, heavenly dough. We're not going to make a classical brioche today. Nancy Silverton is going to make this beautiful dough and turn it into sticky buns. And these pretty things, and what are they?
We call them savory brioche pockets.
Savory brioche pockets.
At the restaurant.
Well, let's get to that dough.
Okay, I'm going to start with making the brioche dough. And the brioche dough, as you said, it's a classic butter dough. And I'm going to make just that, but I'm going to make mine starting with a sponge. And a sponge is a pre-dough of sorts to get the yeast ready to go, multiplied, growing. I start out with 2 1/4 teaspoons of dried yeast, 1/3 cup of warm milk. I usually have it hand hot, which is a perfect temperature for the yeast, 1 egg, and a cup of flour. And with the flour, I'm going to scoop a big scoop and level it off with my knife to make sure I have just the right. You know, this is all-purpose flour.
Unbleached?
Unbleached all-purpose. With a bread dough, I usually use a flour that has more protein, but with brioche, I use an all-purpose flour. Mix it up a little. See how nice and wet that is? And now I'm going to cover it with another cup of flour. And by covering it, I'm going to insulate my sponge so it doesn't dry out. And also, it's going to show me if my yeast is really active before I add my expensive ingredients like my delicious butter.
That'll kind of rise up.
Yeah, it'll rise and it'll crack. And that usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes. See how the flour is cracked? It's a sign that our yeast is alive.
Because it's swelling.
Right. I use a sponge in, I think, all the yeast doughs that I do. It adds flavor and also keeping quality. Now I'm going to add my sugar to my recipe, and that is
1/3 cup, rounded.
I can add my salt directly on top of this because my yeast remembers at the bottom. You never want to add salt directly to yeast. This is, look at nice
1
kosher
teaspoon salt. Kosher salt.
Right. And my 4 eggs. You know, I always crack my eggs into a separate bowl. I don't like eggshells in my brioche. And see, when you get a little eggshell down and it sinks to the bottom. But that's okay.
That's 4, so that would be 3/4 cup of egg, whole egg. There.
Now remember, I put a cup of flour on my sponge, so I have a cup and a half left to add.
So you had a cup in the sponge, a cup on top of it.
And now I'm going to add a cup and a half, but actually
So
I'm
that's
just...
about a pound, isn't it?
Of flour, right.
Yeah.
But I'm really going to only add 1 cup at this point and hold back a 1/2 cup and add it if needed. And this way you have much more control of your dough. So make sure you turn it on slowly so you don't have flour going all over. And remember, I preserved a 1/2 cup, so I'm going to add it as I need it. The dough has done exactly what it needs to do, and that is wrapping itself around the hook.
And you just let it wrap around.
Right, you let it wrap around, and it begins to slap. You can really hear a change in the sound that it makes.
You think it's now done?
We're now ready to incorporate our butter. It's very important that the consistency of the butter is the same consistency of our brioche so that they incorporate very easily. We've taken this out of the refrigerator so that it's room temperature. Here, give it a feel.
Yeah, it's cool, but
It's
not
cool.
chilled.
No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work it a little.
Yeah.
Okay, just to really make that temperature the same. Now you can either knead it by bashing it with a rolling pin, or be a little bit kinder, which I'm going to be, and just do that with a dough scraper.
The butter rights people would be after you if you bashed it.
Okay, so we'll be gentle like this. But do be careful not to touch it, or touch it as little as possible, because the warmth of your hands again, is going to turn this into
'Cause it
melted
get-
butter.
And then you get kind of a greasy brioche.
Right. A little bit higher. Okay, so we're going to add the butter. Now, we let this mix for 15 minutes without the butter earlier. But once the butter is, we add the butter, we want it just to blend and then turn it off. Now, if the butter starts to stick to the sides, you can scrape it down with the spatula. Turn your machine off.
Is it
And
because the
also-
butter is stuck here? Yeah.
Right, it's kind of slapping around. Help it a little in there. And what you can also do is add a few pinches of flour, and that will help also. A little more help, and then the machine is ready
It
to work
certainly
on
looks
its own.
awful. You think, looking at it now, gosh, I've ruined it.
Exactly. Can you hear the slapping sound at this stage also, and you know that you're almost there?
That was a definite slapping there.
Here, feel the temperature of this dough. You can see it's still really cool after all that
Yes, it is. It's surprising.
after all that mixing, and it's
Yeah.
very important that it is left
Because otherwise,
cool.
you said it will be turned oily.
Right, and you won't get the volume, and you
Yeah.
won't get the structure. So we're going to transfer our brioche to a nice, clean, lightly oiled bowl. We're going to put this in a nice, warm place and let it double in volume.
That's beautifully risen now. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
doubled in bulk.
Yeah.
And now it's time for me to deflate it.
Smelling good.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a little peek in here.
Oh, it's kind of webby, isn't
Uh-huh.
it? Isn't that interesting?
It's kind of grown to its capacity. Now, if we had let it go much longer, what would have happened is it would have been inverted.
Oh, it would begin to collapse again.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, and that meant it went too long. But now we need to deflate it, let the air out, the gas out, and redistribute the yeast so it has new food sources to eat off of and grow again.
So that will give it that lovely, soft, lovely texture.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you know, most doughs at this point you would be able to shape and let rise again in a pan or whatever
Yeah.
you're going to make. But because this dough is so sticky, it would be really difficult to work with. And that's why it needs to be refrigerated.
It is sticky, isn't it? Yeah.
I usually refrigerate mine overnight, but really 4 to 6 hours is plenty, just so it's firm and ready to use. So this is really a gentle kind of a twist. That's all I do. It needs
It's
to
just-
be covered and refrigerated.
Okay, let's see that's done.
I have one that's already been chilled down and ready to,
And it looks
Use.
kind of lumpy, doesn't
yeah,
it?
it rises again.
Yeah.
Not as
And
much
that
as
is-
before.
That is really chilled.
Now I'm going to take this batch of dough that we made. I'm going to divide it in half. The recipe would make 2 pans of sticky buns.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Sticky
Yes, I'm going to
buns,
make sticky
good.
buns with one of them, and I'm going to save the other half for the brioche pockets.
So that should be refrigerated.
Right, until we're ready to use it.
Okay. What are we going to do now? Is
Well, I'm actually going to take this soft, buttery dough and add a little more butter to it
Oh, well, that's always
by
good.
rolling it in. But it's sort of an interesting technique. It's very much like puff pastry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's great to have this marble to roll the dough on. It keeps it cool. And just as we were cautious about handling the butter too much when we were adding it to the dough, the same needs to be done when you're rolling it out. You
No.
don't really want to touch it.
No.
I mean, it's irresistible and you want to, but
Yeah,
you want to.
but
You
you
really
have to
want to
keep it
touch it as
cold.
little as possible, so that it does stay cold. You know, I always measure the size of the dough that I'm rolling out,
Yeah.
and that way I'll always get the right amount of sticky buns. I need 7 per pan. So we're going to do 11 by 14. A little bit longer.
You have to be a fast roller, don't you?
Okay, now we're going to give it a few turns. We're going to dot in 3 ounces of butter. You know, this technique can also be used for puff pastry if you don't
I've
want
never
to
seen
do
that
it.
particular one. That's very sensible. A lot easier than folding it in 3. That's very clever. That's a much easier method.
But you know, I
Now
used
notice
to.
you go beyond the edge. You just roll up to the edge.
Right. There we go. And this, we're going to chill for half an hour,
Mm-hmm.
both to firm it back up and also to allow it to relax a little bit.
Now that's nice and is that ready to roll again?
It's ready to roll. We'll see as soon as we start to roll. If it springs back too much and it becomes too difficult, I'll have to let it relax a little longer. But this feels all right.
You can't rush these things, can you? You've got to,
No,
they
you
have
can't
to be
rush
cold,
dough.
and you can't rush yeast.
No, you can't. You know, we're working with something that's alive. And it's very different than if it was
And if
just a
this-
sugar crust dough.
And if this hadn't rested enough, it would retract. And
Exactly, but see, this is perfect. You know, if you see a little butter poking through, which is very natural, just add a little bit extra flour right there. If you
yeah.
start to roll the butter that's coming through, you're going to end up with a sticky mess. Lift it up, make sure it's not sticking.
that's a lovely smell. I could eat it raw.
I'm going to roll this out again to 11 by 14. There we go. We got the size. Now I'm going to make a little egg wash so that our cinnamon sugar sticks. And I'm actually going to use just a whole egg. If I wanted a dark egg wash, I would use just the yolk. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just use the whole egg because we're just using this egg wash more or less as glue.
You know,
Spread it on. Alrighty, I have 2 tablespoons of sugar that I've mixed with 1/8 of a teaspoon of cinnamon.
I can
We'll
see that.
sprinkle.
The egg wash holds on
Yeah.
that, doesn't it?
There's a 1/2 cup of pecans that are chopped. You know, the whole ones, or the halves actually, we're going to stick on the sides of them so that it's very decorative. This I'm going to roll a little. Now I stay away from the edge so that when I roll it up, it seals. Otherwise,
I
the
see. A little more.
pecans get in the way. Not too tight of a roll.
There we are.
There we go. I'm going to set this in the freezer for about 45 minutes, just so it's firm enough that when I go to slice it, I don't squish
Good.
the dough. While our dough is freezing, I'm going to prepare the pan for the sticky buns. We're going to put the butter and the brown sugar. To soften butter, 1 stick.
That's what really makes them sticky and beautiful, isn't
Right,
it?
it gives it that shine, and also that that stick to your teeth.
You know,
Okay, just needs to cover the bottom.
you know.
And a 1/2 cup of brown sugar.
And this is light brown sugar.
Right, the dark brown sugar has a lot of molasses in it, and
What
that's
doesn't
not.
be too dark.
Yeah, it's not a.
A rather coarse taste.
There we
Yeah.
go. You got that firm
There you
brioche?
are.
Great.
That's such
Oh,
a
yeah,
good
that's
idea. You never would be able to cut slices out of it, would you?
No,
If
it would just collapse. Can you see the layers of butter that we have in there that from folding the butter in earlier?
I'll have to put on my glasses, but I'm
Oh.
sure it's there
It's
if you
there,
see
all
it.
right. I'm going to cut them into 1.5 inch slices.
You want 7,
Yeah, 7 of them.
5, 6, 7. That's right.
Cut them.
Yeah.
There we go. Flatten a bit around it. You know, I'm going to stick a few pecans on the underneath side. Every time I see pecans on a sweet roll, I always know.
They're what?
Sticky buns, that's the classic
Oh, I see. I
sign
guess
for
sticky
a
buns are an
sticky
American
bun.
invention, I guess. Are they?
They are.
Yeah.
How about if I hand these to you and you
All right, fine.
press them in? And this last one would be for the middle. Gotta find a nice warm place to set these out again.
They have to rise again.
Yeah, they're gonna all grow together.
How long does that take about? 'Cause this is
This takes
chilled.
another
It'll take
hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah. So here they are, ready risen.
Oh yeah, those are all
Look
ready
at
to
them,
go
they're
in.
really puffy.
Yeah, and they're all stuck
Yeah.
together.
Okay, here we go.
Go
What
in.
temperature do you put them in?
Well, on your oven here, I'm going to be cooking them at 325 degrees because it's a convection oven.
Yeah.
If you don't have a convection oven, I would suggest maybe 25 degrees more. 350 would be good.
350.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to invert.
They certainly
They look good,
smell
huh?
good. Yeah, they smell wonderful.
Now cross your fingers.
Okay, there they are.
You know, it could have been a good idea to run a knife maybe around them in case they stuck, but
Well, you can always turn them over and do it again.
no.
They came out. Well, they really
Oh,
are
they look
sticky.
beautiful, huh?
They really are sticky, aren't they?
Yes, unfortunately they have to cool though because you'll
We
really
can't
get quite
eat
a
one
burn.
now.
No, you
Well,
gotta let them
put
cool.
it over there and let them cool. There, here's your chilled half of brioche dough.
Great. Now we're gonna make our savory brioche pockets.
Oh, good.
Yes,
They sound
it's
wonderful.
Nice and chilled. Yeah, you know, I love doing things like this, using up leftovers in your refrigerator. Today we're going to be using some goat cheese and asparagus and potatoes. But first we need to roll the dough out. And we're going to roll it quite thin because we don't want our pockets to be as bready, right?
I see, yes.
We want to be able to really taste the filling. There we go. You know, I can take that baking sheet that's right behind you and I'm going to roll it actually right on the back side so that it's easier to come off.
And that's that wonderful paper. Is it silicone paper? I don't know.
Yeah, it's silicone paper.
Yeah, and the
then
things
when
don't stick on it.
But I'm going to also reuse this paper when we go to bake the tarts on the
Yeah.
baking sheet. Can you refrigerate that for me?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Let me start with blanching some of the asparagus. And I cook them for about 2 minutes.
And then you want to refresh them in this ice water here?
Right, stop the cooking in the
Fine,
ice water.
okay. You've got
I've
onions.
got my caramelized onions. I caramelize them in more butter. Very slowly, you know, low flame, maybe 25, 30 minutes, as long
really
as possible.
Even and brown.
Right,
Nice.
to slowly color in. It really brings out the sweetness of the onion.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got some potatoes that are peeled.
Steamed potatoes.
These are red rose potatoes. And I'm going to mash them with a fork rather coarsely. I don't want mashed potatoes because it's nice to bite into that pocket and have some texture.
Kosher salt.
A little pepper.
Pepper.
Got black pepper. And I'm just adding a couple tablespoons of cream. Oh, this is nice. Ooh, nice heavy piece there. And you know, the joy of cooking sometimes as opposed to baking is it's not as precise. And I kind of
Yes. But they always say
Kind
that
of
the
like
best
that.
cooks start out as bakers because they have to be precise.
You know, I just added a little goat cheese into here.
Now, do you want to see
asparagus.
whether these are done enough for you?
Let's take a bite. Oh yeah.
That's
Perfect.
right. Okay, I'll
Because they're going to cook again, remember, in the oven in the pocket. So.
I'll put them in the ice water to stop the cooking.
Sure.
There's a nice chilled, rested dough,
Rested
ready
dough.
to roll.
I'm going to give it a quick roll because it always does shrink just a bit in the refrigerator, okay? You know, if you could turn the sheet pan over and put the parchment paper in there,
Okay.
then we can put our pockets in there. All right, let me give it a roll. Here we
It's
go.
very thin. That's
Yeah,
about a 1/16 of an inch, I would think, wouldn't you?
it is, you know, but remember there is yeast in here, and once it
So
goes in
it's
the oven,
gonna
it's going to puff up.
Yeah, so
and
you want it really thin.
you do need it thin. I'm going to be cutting these out with a cut. This is about 4.5 inches round. Cut them fairly close together so there's not too much
Yeah.
waste here.
Then you can reuse the dough, can't you?
Sure. You can also freeze scraps.
Yes.
When you put them on the tray, you can't crowd because they are going to expand. So
Yes, of
you
course.
might have to do, if you do a full recipe, do it on 2 sheet pans,
Yeah,
rotate them in the
Yeah.
oven. Let's see if this is cool. Yeah, it is. I'm going to just taste it for final seasoning. What do you think? A little bit more salt and pepper?
The goat cheese is nice. I think a little more pepper. I think
more
we didn't
pepper?
have enough salt.
A little more pepper. Oh, and let's not forget our chives, which we have right over there.
yeah.
I'll mix those in.
There they are.
A couple tablespoons of chives. Really, any herbs would be fine. Thyme would be delicious. I love potato and thyme. Okay, you know, can you put about a tablespoon of caramelized onion?
In the middle?
Just in the middle,
That's going to be lovely.
So we're going to mound the potato. About 2 tablespoons of potato, does that look like? Okay, and then maybe 2 asparagus tips on top.
I never would have thought of making a tart with mashed potato, but everyone loves mashed potato.
It's quite delicious.
Oh.
I think you'll be pleasantly
There we are.
surprised. Now we need to put the tops on. And I'm putting this top on and I see that it shrunk a little bit, so we'll just help it along by dimpling it. And
Well,
then
that's a
with
good
this,
idea, the dimpling, isn't it? I wouldn't have thought of that.
help
So that's
stretch
why
it.
it's nice working with a pro, because you got all these little tricks.
Okay, now with this, I'm going to kind of crimp it backwards. And the crimping actually, we're going to lose its definition in the oven, so it's not that important. The importance is that it doesn't open up and everything spill out.
Let's see, what have you're
So I'm
pressing
sort of-
your finger
I'm
down
pressing
in
my
there.
finger to hold
Yeah.
it, and I'm rolling it back towards the mound. But I'm picking up both layers, see?
Yeah.
And then folding it back
Yeah.
and pressing down.
And they just stick by
And
themselves.
they stick by themselves. We're not going to have picture perfect, not all will look the same, which is really, I think, adds to the look of them.
So they don't look factory made.
They definitely don't look factory made. Alrighty, got my egg wash. This is what's going to give it its gorgeous brown. And just a little poppy seed
Poppy seed, that's a nice idea, yeah.
and a little sage.
Fresh sage leaves. Well, that's nice.
And they bake, and they don't really discolor much in the oven. We're going to let these rest for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to bake them at a 350-degree oven for
And then
20 to 25 minutes.
And then we'll eat them.
And then we'll eat them.
Great. Now we're going to eat them. So we start with this savory brioche pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Something
look, you-
savory before something sweet, of
You
course.
show me how you do it. Now, should they be warm or what?
Warm or room temperature. Either one. You know, at the bakery, we have them piled on big plates, and people buy them and wrap a napkin around them
Just
and eat them to go.
with sandwiches.
Oh, look at.
Just look at that. And there's the potatoes and the onions, and smells so good too.
It does.
And we'll just take a bite out of it.
But it's nice when you have all those colors, huh?
And having the brioche dough is so tender and full and lovely. I think that's a triumph. I just love that.
Great.
Now, the sticky buns. They're that beautifully rich. Now again, do you serve that warm?
These need to cool because
They
what will
do.
happen is the sugar from the sticky part will
they'll
really
be
burn your
really
fingers.
sticky, yeah.
They'll be sticky and they'll get to your teeth. But these we just pull apart, and
Now, how do you just
want to
pull?
split one? I'm gonna just
just
use
pull
my
them
hands and
apart?
pull them apart. Oh, look at the wonderful layers in the elastic dough
Look
that
at
we
that.
developed.
Beautiful dough.
See, it still maintained the integrity of the brioche itself,
Yes,
which is
it
nice.
has, hasn't it? As you can tell by that.
The pulliness, uh-huh. Now the test is in the taste, huh?
Oh, awfully good. They're not too sweet. I think they're just right. But having this perfectly made brioche makes such a difference, doesn't it? I think these are the best brioche I've ever had.
Well, thank you.
And thank you so much. That's a beautiful display of what you can do with it. Bon appetit!